That's where the radar system really helps organizations rethink how they can approach making sure that they have presence in these AI systems. And so radar really stands for reveal, align, design, activate, and recalibrate.
Welcome to the Omniscient Buyer Show, where AI, trust, and buyer behavior collide. Hosted by Halko and Tony Zayas, this show explores how modern buyers are using AI to research faster, verify claims instantly, and demand radical transparency from sales and marketing teams. If your buyers already know more than your sellers, you're in the right place.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to today's show. We're going to be shifting gears a little bit today. Andy, up to this point, as we went through the book, we really talked about how the buyer changed and how AI forms judgment. And this is where we're going to shift, and we're going to kind of replace the operating system. So you have this R.A.D.A.R operating system. So I would like to dive into that, and if you can unpack what R.A.D.A.R stands for, and then kind of how it works, and we can dive into that today.
Yeah, and I think, I always like to start out just kind of connecting the dots, right? And so one of the first things that we should talk about, and we talked about in past shows, is how much buyers are shifting to AI as their primary tool. And we talked a lot about, because it reduces friction, it reduces pain. Instead of me doing a search and clicking through 20 links and figuring things out, I get answers. I get quick answers, and I, often get right answers. And so naturally, everyone is going to be moving to AI as a key discovery, consideration, decision-making tool. That is just the nature of humanity, that we're going to go towards things that reduce our pain and friction. And so that's where the R.A.D.A.R system really helps organizations rethink how they can approach making sure that they have presence in these AI systems. And so R.A.D.A.R really stands for reveal, align, design, activate, and recalibrate. And now that sounds all, I make it sound good, right? It's in the book. You have to develop a system. That's what it's about. But it really is built on a foundation of what you want to do to approach this new world where you want to be in AI engines. And it's really about reveal, see what the buyer sees. We talked about auditing in past episodes, making sure you understand what folks, if they prompt something in AI engines, what they're getting back. You want to reveal what they see. Right. You want to align your narrative. You want to make sure that internally you're creating a consistent story about your business that you can use everywhere, because AI engines respect consistency. Then you want to design which is engineering signals for trust. I think today, a lot of what marketing is going to need to shift to is a lot of trust building and making sure that you're providing proof and validation. That was always important, but with AI, people are doing most of their journey there. By the time they reach you, they need those trust and validation signals right up front.
Right.
And then we've got activate, which is deliver the right signal at the right moment. This is really that distribution stage, making sure that you're taking, what you have with align, which is that consistent narrative, and design, which is about trust and proof, and you're activating it across different networks so that AI can really capture it and make it part of their responses to potential buyers. And then really recalibrate is the natural thing that we do in everything, is see if it's working and make changes if it's not. And so it's really a very simple, structure that you see in many different things, but it does help organizations create a way to look at this that's very structured.
Yeah, it's great. And I think in this kind of new world, it is a solid roadmap for how to proceed and work through it, because I think a lot of people have questions about kind of what do we do. So if we can, what I would like to do, you explained it. I would like to go through each of the steps, and then we can talk about like, how do you apply that? So what could people be implementing to focus on reveal? So the first one is reveal, and that's really seeing what the AI sees before the buyer does, right? So being aware of kind of what the AI engines are saying about your business. So what are some actionable steps that organizations can do to stay on top of this?
So there's a reason that it's very specific about see what the AI, has for a buyer. And that's because you and I talk a lot about this needs to be thought of from an individual buyer perspective. What a CIO at a Fortune 500 and a CRO at a Fortune 500, in information officer versus revenue officer are going to prompt very different things into AI engines. They also may use different ones. The chief information officer might use Copilot because it's built in with Microsoft. The chief revenue officer uses his phone because he's out all the time, and he's using ChatGPT because it's easy and it's connected. And so there's a couple of things to unpack there. Of one, you need to start by dividing your audience up and segmenting them, and then determining what each of those audiences might be prompting through different stages of discovery, consideration, evaluation. And then you have to actually do that across different AI engines, because we're not in the old school days of SEO where Google owned the whole market share. We're now in a world where it's pretty distributed across different AI engines and their usage. And so being able to just focus on one will be a disaster if you do it, versus you really have to think about all of those different AI engines. Right. So that reveal is really important, to focus on the buyer and segment, develop prompts that they're really putting in the system, and then make sure that you're looking across multiple AI platforms to understand what the narrative is when people make these prompts.
Well, that sounds a lot of manual work if someone were to do that, and probably can do it, right? And so running prompts through all of, ChatGPT, Gemini, so on and so forth, for all of the different buyers. But shameless plug, we've built some tools that help with this type of thing, and there's other solutions out there. But do you mind sharing just a little bit about kind of how you've seen this and addressed it head on? Because the need has arisen for these type of tools.
Yeah, I think, the reason we created Buyer Twin, which is our product, is that really we see that this is a necessity for organizations moving forward, and there's not really a great way to do it. There are some visibility tools out there, but they tend to be generic. With Buyer Twin, what we've done is really helped organizations segment their audiences and then have the system think through their pains, their buying factors, their motivations, what trends they're interested in, and develop prompts that they will ask AI engines based off of that. And so if you're looking at a chief information officer, it's going to think through what are the pains that they have every day in their job? What are their motivations? What, responsibilities do they have in their job? And then it's going to step back and say, okay, based off of that, this is what they're probably going to prompt into AI engines. And so it's really taking that mindset of moving away from generalized prompts, like my whole audience is asking, what company does this, to the CIO is specifically asking, if I have these three systems, what is the best way for me to move forward? Because that is a very different prompt that a CIO will have than some other person.
So that addresses kind of reveal. And if people haven't checked it out, buyertwin.com, try it out for free, see how it works. The next step in the process is align. So that's unifying that narrative, both inside and out externally. What would you suggest for that? What is a high level approach to taking action towards that?
Well, I think it's sitting down and developing a codified, go-to source, your Bible for your organization's narrative. I think one of the things that we see in companies is that often they'll create some sort of brand positioning, or they'll create some messaging, and then it sits in a desk or a corner and people kind of go off on their own.
Right.
And so over time, I talk about this in my book, it drifts away. It's not something that happens overnight. It slowly drifts away from the core narrative that you've developed. What you want to do with AI is be consistent, is the letting the system create an algorithm that can identify consistency so it answers upon that. And so really what you want to do to have consistency is make sure your army of people have the same weapons, that they are going out to the marketplace carrying the same things. And so it really is an organization going in and developing a very clear, consistent narrative, and then making sure that your organization is using it in everything, whether it's creating a blog post, creating a directory, creating sales materials, marketing materials, updating old information, speaking about the organization at events, whatever it might be. You want to make sure you're using the same language, same narrative over and over again.
All right. So the alignment's in place, kind of the plan is in place. Next, we're moving into design, which is essentially engineering trust signals, right? So how do we go about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about trying to signal both to the AI engines and to these potential buyers that, there's validation. I think we're in a world where there's so much content and information out there. Folks can find anything. So it's how do you engineer trust? Right. That people believe what you say. They believe the organization, whether that's the AI engine saying, okay, I can trust this information, so I'm going to use it. Or it's the user going through the process in AI, they shortlist, they finally get to your website, that those trust signals are front and center so they can believe what they just learned. Because they're going to be going through a process where not on your website, they are understanding things about you. They're making considerations. They're shortlisting. By the time they get to you, they just want to validate it. They want to know, okay, what I just read is accurate. I'm ready to move forward because I've already thought through it. And so it's really about engineering these things. So things that companies need to do is promote stuff like case studies, partnerships, the people in the organization. This was a big part of my book, was bringing people forward so that, your brand is not faceless, and really bring that authenticity forward. So there's a lot of different tactics that you can do, but I really think it has to be one of the top items on marketing teams' list today, is to make sure that they're constantly engineering trust.
Just to add on to that point of not being a faceless company, I think in the age of AI, where even like those AI avatars that can show up and like you and I, this video, we might both be synthetic, right? We're not, but sometimes you see videos and like you wouldn't have known unless you were really, critiquing it. The whole idea of companies putting faces forward, I think that becomes more and more important, that people know who they're dealing with, that they're dealing with real people behind it. And that is a powerful way to establish trust. So I just wanted to add that on there.
Well, and I'll even use a real example. You and I, we just got a lead, and in the email or in the message that came through our website, they said, I'd like to talk to Andy and Tony, right? They used our first names. There is something to that obviously that person went through a process, saw real people, maybe heard from us a little bit. And by the time they actually reached out, they had some sort of connection that they wanted to talk to these folks, right? And so I really think that there is going to be a need for that for every organization, is not feeling like they're headed into a void or into some sort of faceless process.
Right. All right. So then we move into activate. So the right signal at that moment of doubt, a little bit trickier. I think you have to have everything in place, but how do we do that?
Yeah, obviously these stages build upon each other, and activate is the clear, pinnacle of this is, okay, now let's take this alignment, this engineered trust, and let's really make sure it's out in the world in the right places. and especially at the right times. And so I really think this is about distributing our message. For us, we create these shows with our narrative, and we distribute it on YouTube, and we share it on, different websites. So we're taking that consistent narrative, we're taking this trust of real humans talking, and we're putting it out there in the right places, and we're doing it in the right ways to make sure that both AI engines capture it and that the people that end up getting to us see it. And so I think the example we just used is someone reaching out to us by name is probably a proof of this activate stage for us. We created a narrative about what we did. We're creating this trust signal. We obviously put it out in the right place so that someone came across it, and then they converted and they, wanted to talk to us directly. And so activate, it's different for every organization, but obviously you're taking these things and you're creating a plan to distribute them in the right places, your website, third-party sites, PR, whatever it might be, to make sure that people are really running into the consistent narrative and the engineered trust.
And then to close out the loop before we head back into it again, it's recalibrate. So that's kind of the idea of take that feedback, look at the drift, look at, where we're at as far as aligning goals. But that's the last step in the process.
Yeah. And in my book, I talk a lot about how do you measure in the AI world. And it is something where we're now coming back and measuring. We're trying to see, are we getting traffic from AI engines? Are we getting leads that, mention by name or have very specificity in what they're looking for? It's basically that measurement, and then taking that, analyzing it, and say, here's what we need to shift or change. The constant in marketing, it's the optimized stage. I call it recalibrate because I think, in the AI world, it's really about continuing to kind of shift and move towards that point on the horizon that you want to reach. And so, it's a common thing, but measure where you're at, and based on what's changed, make new plans to do it better.
Right. So there it is. It's a holistic plan to understand what AI is saying about you, and then optimize and improve. If anyone is interested in more of a deep dive or, customized R.A.D.A.R system for your organization, go to incivity.com, fill out the contact form, let us know. We'd be happy to jump on a call and talk through this, work through it with you. But aside from that, I would encourage everybody to check out buyertwin.com. Again, because it solves some of the problems that we're seeing that are emerging as AI becomes more and more important out there. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Omniscient Buyer Show. If this episode challenged how you think about buyers, sales, or AI, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. For deeper insights on AI-powered buyer behavior, answer engine optimization, and modern go-to-market strategy, visit incivia.com.